Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Yousef Ahmed al-Rimawi, Nasser Mashni and Robert Martin. Today's episode will be purely dedicated to the Nakba and the last update of the Palestinian hunger-striking prisoners in Israeli jails. For this and more, stay with us and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Nasser.
Morning, Yousef. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. We are today without Robert. Robert will join us next week. So I want to start by saying a big thank you to those who made our event in support of the prisoners possible last Sunday by turning up, by sending their support online or by calling us. We had a successful event on Sunday. The turn-up was great. We had Australian politicians, Senator Janet Rice from the Greens, Senator Gavin Marshall from ALP, and Member of Parliament Bronwyn Halfpenny spoke about their solidarity and support of the Palestinian prisoners. And Janet and Gavin had just arrived from Palestine, so they gave their from APAN
stories,
from APAN trip to Palestine. Yep. They gave their first-hand stories and their reflections on occupation and what it means to live in occupation. So thank you to everybody who organized it and who participated. And today marks the 20th day of hunger strike, where our heroes behind Israeli bars are still waging this non-violent means of resistance to protest against the inhumane treatment, the deprivation of education, deprivation of family visits, and deprivation of even meeting their lawyers. But more importantly, medical negligence. I just want to mention one story by Marah Bakir, the 16-year-old Palestinian girl who was taken to prison with broken arm. And 18 months later, she is still denied treatment.
Wow.
And that is just one example of systematic, deliberate medical negligence to inflict more pain and more suffering. But you know what? Like Marwan Barghouthi says, our chains will be broken before we are.
Absolutely. The steadfastness of the Palestinian people is something that, people...
unbreakable.
Unbreakable, but also the steadfastness is something that's admired by so many people around the world, and it's why Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free. Nakba is
absolutely. This is a big topic for this week and for next week, because it's such a turning point in Palestinian history, and it's important. Yousef, you were just talking about the deprivation of Palestinian rights when they're in Israeli jails, and the levels of control that Israel exerts over the Palestinians, access to medical, education, phone visits, etc. But when we talk about systematic, we have to realize the systemization of the ethnic cleanse that is Palestine. And we need to go back. We talk about Nakba, in fact, in 1948, and this is couched because on May 15, Israel was announced declared as a state. But in fact,
the making of that,
But in fact, the roots of Nakba are in fact in the late 19th century, and they go back to the first Zionist Congress. So this Congress later became the World Zionist Organization. It was held in Basel in Switzerland, August 29 to August 31, 1897. And it was convened by the chairperson, Theodor Herzl, who's the founder of modern Zionism. And at the end of the conference, the Congress formulated the Zionist platform as we know it today. And it's known as the Basel Program. And it says explicitly, Zionism aims at establishing for the Jewish people a publicly and legally assured home in Palestine. For the attainment of this purpose, the Congress considers the following means serviceable. Number one, the promotion of the settlement of Jewish agriculturists artisans and tradesmen in Palestine, the federation of all Jews into local or general groups according to the laws of various countries, the strengthening of the Jewish feeling and consciousness, and preparatory steps for the attainment of those governmental grants which are necessary to the achievement of the Zionist purpose. So this is 1897. In Theodor Herzl's own diary, only a few days later he writes, "If I were to sum up the Basel Conference in one word, it would be this. At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I were to say this out loud today, I'd be met with universal laughter. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will see it."
And that's what really pretty much had happened, which means that the Palestinian Nakba didn't just happen. There was a plot, there was a conspiracy, there were planning, and we have to also acknowledge that the conference was in response to the anti-Semitic atmosphere in Europe, especially in Russia.
Yeah, and at that time, 95% of the population of Palestine was Arab. And they
and
owned 99% of the land.
And the 5% Jews who lived in Palestine lived in freedom and peace with their Muslim and Christian Palestinians.
Absolutely.
And they were as Palestinians as us.
You're correct. And now following that conference, interestingly, the work started, the preparatory work, and some rabbis were sent from Austria. And they famously came back to the Zionist Congress and said, "The bride is beautiful, but she is married to another man." Meaning, the land is gorgeous, but there's people there.
Unlike the myth they started, which is the Jews are people without land and Palestine is land without people.
That's right. And, but only as European colonialists can do. Because, what the suggestion of the bride being beautiful and married is that, the land is taken, we should find something else. But, when you're a European colonialist, instead of looking for something else to marry, you just go rape
and you kill the husband.
The bride that's there. And, we move on from that, and that story was once recounted to Golda Meir, who, became Prime Minister of Israel. And she's reported as saying, "And I thank God every night that the bridegroom was so weak that the bride could be taken away." And we've talked earlier about how all the other Arab nations were given independence, with inverted commas, except for Palestine, and the conspiracy between Balfour, etc., to steal Palestine from the Palestinians.
Can I just here stop, Nasser, and try maybe in 1 minute to explain how the Arab world looked like towards the end of the Ottoman rule. Most of the Arab territories was under Turkish administration, maybe the weak Turkish administration, because short after the Zionist conference, World War I took place. So the Arab regimes were either under Turkish mandate or under European mandate, like, for example, Algeria, or independent, like Morocco, or semi-independent, like Egypt, where you had the Muhammad Ali dynasty ruling in some form of arrangement with Turkey. But in general, the Arab world from Oman to Morocco, this 14 million square kilometers, were not as independent as you might think. They were under foreign rule.
Occupation,
And Palestine was under Turkish mandate, like the other neighbors.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it before, Yousef. If you go to World War I memorials, and, Anzac Day just went past, you'll see Palestine noted. Gallipoli, Palestine, because, the Arabs of Palestine fought with the Allies for their liberation,
And that is in contradiction to the allegations made by Netanyahu on his visit to us here, that Australia and Australia fought for the Beersheba battle, and there was actually Arabs fighting.
It was Arabs. There was no Jews there.
There was no Jews there.
There may have been a Jew in the Australian army.
That's one thing we'll come back later
absolutely.
to. But my friend is writing about that in Sydney, and we will definitely cover it.
We'll come back to it, absolutely. So coming back to Golda Meir and the question of Palestine, the land had already been promised by Lord Balfour to Lord Rothschild and the Zionists in the Balfour Declaration. But of course you can't just give land over, post World War I, post the promise. So the process has to be undertaken. How do we gently see this process through? And we saw the increase of Jewish migration enabled by the British mandate. And then, what then happened to the British, surprisingly, because they, strange bedfellows, but terrorism was introduced to Palestine. And terrorism was introduced to Palestine not by the indigenous Palestinians and the Arabs. It was introduced
not by radical Islam.
Not by radical Islam. terrorism, bombs in markets, bombs in
hotels,
and car bombs and things like that. These terrorist operations were introduced by terrorist
Jewish gangs.
Jewish gangs, that's right. The Haganah, Stern, Irgun. And they were all led by future prime ministers of Israel,
like Menachem Begin, who was on the wanted list of
absolutely.
Of
We've
Britain.
posted his picture on our podcast, listeners, if you want to go back and see that. So terrorism was introduced to Palestine by these Jewish people, and not radical Jews. These were, the leaders of Israel tomorrow. And this is what Judaism was, Zionism was to the Palestinians that were in Palestine.
Can I here highlight the issue of that the founders of Zionism were not, none of them claimed biblical titles.
No.
None of them were like
They
the
were
religious,
atheists.
pretty much non-believers of God.
Non-believers, but they believe God gave them the land, yeah?
Somehow.
So these Jewish terrorist gangs, many of them were trained by the British. Some of them, no question, fought in World War II with the Allies. But by 1939, this Jewish, they called it the auxiliary force, numbered 20,000 trained men and women. And they renamed themselves the Jewish Settlement Force. And it gives itself, some sort of innocent-sounding name, we're here to settle. When in fact, one of the things that we were talking about the terrorist activities, as you know, Yousef, the Jewish terrorists targeted British officers. And they would booby-trap British dead so as to maim the British that came to get them. They hung them by a piano wire, to the point in the last years of the British Mandate, the Jewish terrorists killed for British officers was 4-1. 4 British officers for every Jewish terrorist killed. So they really went about creating the situation that enabled the need for the British to remove themselves from the mandate of Palestine and to hand it over to the United Nations.
Well, Nasser, I think the making of the State of Israel, the 50 years, we will be doing injustice if we try to cover all these 50 years in one show. But the timeline of it will be from the Zionist Council and then trying with Turkey, trying to maybe bribe Turkey into allowing the Jewish migration, which didn't work, and then World War I, and then Balfour Declaration, and 2 months after the declaration started the British Mandate, and the British Mandate facilitated the migration and allowed the flow of cash and people to build the state.
Hundreds of thousands, and to the protestations of the Palestinians. And we talk about, Golda Meir being so happy that the bridegroom was weak. We talk about, you can go back to, the Arab riots, and what the British did to take out all of the elite Palestinians, the policy of housing demolitions, the hangings, the expulsions. This is all part of the conspiracy to steal Palestine from its Arabs.
Was a complicity between Britain and the Zionist Council, or the Zionist organization. Of course, we don't want to exempt the Arabs. Not all of them, but some of the Arabs also were complicits when it came to the establishment of Israel. And just only last night, I posted a declassified, it was classified until recently, document of mentioning the names of Arabs who corresponded with the Zionists from the year 1907 until late 30s.
Wow.
And you have names of people who are known of being leaders of the social justice in their own countries. We're not going to go there now, but the complicity was huge. The conspiracy was well planned. The plotting was well mastered, and therefore it was nearly impossible for any nation who would assume that these people are fleeing anti-Semitism and came here for protection to know their real plans.
Yeah. And one of the founding myths of the State of Israel is that this plucky Jewish nation had to protect itself from the invading Arab armies. And Yousef, you spoke to the conspiracy of leading Arab intellectuals and leaders leaving the Palestinians to fend for themselves. In fact, we know from the declassified Israeli documentation, and the leader, revisionist historian Ilan Pappé, in his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, he talks about Plan Dalet. And Plan Dalet is the letter D in the Jewish alphabet is the fourth one. But Plan Dalet follows Plan A, B, and C. The Plan Dalet, which was enacted in November of 47, which precipitated the ethnic cleansing, the movement forcibly of the indigenous population, 800,000 people from Palestine. The movement of the forced expulsion of those people was planned by David Ben-Gurion and his cabal. He called them the consultancy, and his own diaries, talk about their plots of identifying villages and whether they needed to be approached from the north, south, east or west, who the village elders were, who they needed to take out, who they'd already bought, and who was a co-conspirator, and what actions the Irgun, Sterngang and Haganah had to undertake to move that village onwards. When we spoke about Deir Yassin. But Plan Dalet, was after Plan Aleph, which was in 1945. Plan B is 47, and C is in the middle of 47. By 1948, with 600,000 new Jews into Palestine, and the ethnic cleansing well underway, with the British completely apathetic about continuing ruling the Palestinians and wanting to get out, we have a situation where a very militarized population, and you get to the point with this, most countries, maybe 1% of the population is in the army. In 1948, something like 1 in 4 Jews of Palestine, because
carried weapons,
were in the army. Not just carried weapons, Yousef. They were trained and ready. They were a military force.
And here it destroys the myth that 7 Arab armies trying to throw the Jews into the sea.
They were already throwing us out.
And the Arabs were outnumbered.
Yeah, outnumbered, outtrained.
The 7 Arab armies were outnumbered by the Jewish militias.
Yep. So we know that Israel declared independence in April before the 15th of May. And since that time, Israel has yet to have a border. In that time, we've had massacre after massacre, expulsion after expulsion, law after law that define who can live where, what they can live. We've had the absentee laws that meant that if you're a Palestinian ethnically cleansed from Palestine because you weren't there, you have left the land behind.
As if they were not driven out by them, and as if they chose not to return.
Correct. So,
Nasser, I want to take a break, but maybe we can definitely go back to this, to the Nakba and the making of Nakba after the break. But I want to also maybe quickly stop at the irony that even the Germans referred to the Holocaust as the last resort, which is the Plan Dalet,
the final solution.
Like the final solution. Like the Zionists also referred to the ethnic cleansing and massacring of Palestinians, which is an irony that reminds us of the Edward Said, that we the Palestinians are the victims. You're listening to Palestine Remembered on 855 AM. Haddiya Bahar, Haddiya, a song for the Palestinian refugees. Nasser, before the break, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I thought just to put the numbers into perspective. So, by the end of 1948, 800,000 Palestinians were expelled from their home. 530 of their villages were destroyed. 11 of their urban neighborhoods were emptied. Massacres such as Deir Yassin spread fear and terror in the hearts of Palestinian families and forced them to take flight. And we go through to the end, and the first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, said, and he commented about the fact that, they were able to establish, their Jewish state, that a miraculous clearing of the land, the miraculous simplification of Israel's task.
As if it just happened.
It just happened, by
being nice to us.
Unbelievable. And Yousef, the reality of Nakba is, every Palestinian has their Nakba story. And I wonder if you would do us the honor of sharing yours and your family's. I
will do my best, Nasser. Maybe over the 13 years of doing the show, I was tempted every year to speak about that, but you would know that it's a heavy topic on our hearts.
Of course.
And it returns the memories of those who are with us and those who are not. And I want to mention the Sheikh Yousef, the person I was named after, my grandfather, the father of my father, who was 35 when Nakba happened. He was just a teacher in a village near, in a town near Jaffa called Majd al-Sadiq. And when in 48, he was driven out to Beit Rima, which is a village later became West Bank. So back then in 48, we didn't have homes to rent. So you either own property or you're gonna be homeless. So he was hosted by his relatives in the Ramallah village of Beit Rima, and they stayed there for 3 years. And you can imagine being a guest at somebody's place for 3 years.
We know what people come over for the weekend, how you feel about them by Monday.
Imagine a week or 2 weeks or a month or 3 months, and they were really in solidarity, because it was the whole population were in solidarity with each other. But 3 years later, my grandfather decided to join the refugees, those who were sent to refugee camps. Back then, in 51, the UNRWA was founded, and to give relief and work for the refugees who were blocked from return to their homes and towns by Israel. And so he joined the refugees, and he chose to live in a refugee camp, and it was near Jericho. That refugee camp is no longer there because Israel bulldozed it after the occupation of Jericho. So they stayed there from 1951 to 1967. Excuse me. And
so just to be clear, Yousef, he was a refugee from 48.
He was a refugee from 48.
And a refugee again post 67.
But before that, another wave internally displaced. So in 48, he went to West Bank. In 51, he went to another place in West Bank. They stayed in West Bank. And of course, the beginning of refugee camps was, okay, now we have education, we have a school, we have the United Nations giving us health. We had a bit of aid. The aid was a little bit of milk, a little bit of rice and sugar, and some clothes that would be enough for a year or 2 years. And you can imagine the uprooting of society and to having to start from all over again. But nevertheless, the Palestinians made it. Yeah. And that's why they gave education huge importance and huge value, because without education, you're not going to be able to start again. So during this time, from 51 to 67, this is the upbringing of my father, Ahmad al-Rimawi. So he grew up in a refugee camp. He had to work in summer holidays to get a bit of cash for his new school year, like every other child in the refugee camp. So in 65, before the fall of the camp, my father became an expatriate, I would say, a teacher working in Saudi Arabia, because back then the oil boom, the Saudis, the Gulf, Kuwait, Bahrain, Emirates, Oman, Qatar, the discovery of oil, they needed human resources, and they found in the Palestinian society a ready to serve, an educated, qualified population ready to serve. And my father became a teacher in Saudi Arabia. But 2 years later, in his absence, Israel occupied West Bank. So they had to be uprooted again for the third time, this time to Jordan. So they went to Jerash, the city of Jerash in Jordan, and they had a bit of peace. A little bit of peace, and 2 years later, the Jordanian-Palestinian PLO clashes, so they again had to find another place because they were in the middle of the clashes. So they went to another city in Jordan, which is the capital, and that's where we are settled. So in my father's line only, we're talking about 4 waves of statelessness up until 1970. What happened after 1970 is something different. We're going to talk about that later. But also I want to quickly talk about my mother's father, because they are from the northern city of Safad. They went on foot to Lebanon and then ended up in Syria. And mom was born a year after Nakba. And she was born in Syria in a time of limbo where there were no refugee camps, no UNRWA. They just had to find places or shelters to stay. And the Syrian population, to their credit, were open to us, and they gave so much solidarity. And they were never an issue of anti-Palestinian sentiment, especially at the beginning of the Palestinian presence. So when Yarmouk camp, the biggest camp in the Palestinian diaspora, what they call the capital of Palestinian diaspora later, it was built in 1957, and the father of my mother was among the 70,000 who the lands they took places or land so that they could build on, and they started their livelihoods in Syria in 57. That's where my other uncles and my cousins and everybody who had a bit of stable life in Syria with a little bit of challenges, of course, so much challenges, economic challenges, social challenges, until the Syrian crisis happened, and the 60 plus relatives that we had in Syria, now we're talking about only 2 of them remained. 50 out of them are dispersed around 7 countries. This is the price of Nakba,
being a Palestinian, yeah.
Being Palestinian and having...
And it's the price of the ongoing Nakba. It just keeps continuing.
And again, now I'm talking about my family, my connection to Majdal, my connection to Ramallah, Beit Rima, to Safad. I talk about it with a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty, I have to say, and I'm holding my tears because I
well, the pain. I mean, this is the challenge we often face in articulating the suffering. I mean, what Yousef's going through now, every Palestinian experiences, because we know the pain that our family feels, the feeling of guilt we have for when fortune smiles upon us, burying our loved ones in strange soil. I mean,
and not being able to visit them,
not being able to visit
their graves.
Yeah. I mean,
so the Nakba is ongoing. The price of statelessness is beyond imagination.
Yeah.
And you're talking about 70 years of statelessness. You're talking about 4 generations that have to that have to pay the price over and over again. And Israel is still enjoying the benefits of living in the best place in the world, which is Palestine, which is our country, and presenting itself as a democratic, free, liberal society that's home to technology and openness, which is really why we will keep the voice heard, and we will keep programs
the lie is
like
being
this.
Exposed every day. The lie is being exposed more and more every day.
Nasser, I think we're heading towards the end of the program. Next week we're going to also talk about the Nakba. We will try to speak about what happened after 48.
The ongoing Nakba, 48 to today.
And I want to thank all the listeners who support this show, and the Australians who support the Palestinian struggle for freedom, independence and justice. So until we meet next week.
We should remind our listeners about sending us SMSs. We love to get those messages of support on 0437 990 415, 0437 990 415.
Thank you, Nasser. And until we meet next week, this is Yousef Ahmed Al-Rimawi and Nasser Al-Mashni. Have a great time and salam.